Um, Hey folks, how's it going? I guess I'll start off by giving a quick introduction of myself. My name is Jabri Harris. I always start off with I'm a social worker. Why else would if I wasn't, why wouldn't I be here? But I say that simply because I work in the policy space and I will never, ever, ever be able, probably in majority of my life, never ever be called a social worker, just for the work that we do. But it's important that that I ground the work that I do, and the core values of the profession. But more so importantly, and people centered solutions. I feel as social workers, our job is to be the social constructs of our time, to really go into our communities and make sure that this daunting process that we know as policy is relatable and is like palatable for folks to digest and take in, and also for them to be able to advocate on their own behalf. We are in a great privilege here to learn this information and start to advocate on their behalf as well. But the ultimate power is to make sure that we are organizing ourselves out of a job, making sure that we are no longer needed because they have the tools. So we are able to pass on the tools to the folks to advocate for themselves. So tonight we're going to be doing a quick and I won't say quick and dirty, but a pretty quick review of HR1 and what the importance of HR1 and why, not only just why we need HR1, but the impact that HR1 possibly could have on our society. So before we start, does anyone have any idea what HR1 is? Okay, we all speak at once. We'll keep it that. So HR1 in itself is for the People Act. It's to impact and select HR policies. And the way I look at it, HR1 is a transformative structural reform package that will build Black and Brown political power. It will promote the benefit of Black and Brown political power across, not just across states, but across the country, and by allowing folks to, in these few, let me pull up the document, screen with folks, here we are. All right, so for HR1, the policy will analyze a plethora of things. I don't want to read verbatim, but I think it's important that we highlight a few things. Making sure that we have the combination of these three things here: online voter registration, automatic voter registration, same day voter registration, has led to the increase in voting across the nation, simply because it brings access, allows access to be right there, and eliminates all the barriers that you have when it comes to voting. Not all the barriers, but the significant amount of barriers that you have is simply meeting people where they are. If you don't have the time to go and register, things of that nature, um, to have the ability to register online, or that you're automatically registered, like here in the state of Michigan, once you turn 18, you get your new license, you're automatically registered. There's no like holdups or anything that you got to sign. You're automatically registered. Or the best thing, same day registration. If you are a person who likes to vote in person and things have just slipped past you for the past couple weeks, days, whatever, and you show up to vote, same day registration has been a wonder at the polls in terms of getting folks that are newer voters out to vote, um, knowing that there's not going to be a huge hangup when you get there, kind of just show up and vote. Um, and then I think it's important to highlight of course, the Voting Rights Restoration Act. Parts of voting rights restoration is the fact that in 1964, when we passed most of our civil rights legislation from between 64 and 67, a lot of those policies that were in place in terms of protection have dwindled away, either through the prodding of states laws, or just the lack of actually enforcing the laws that's on the books. Like what we saw in Georgia in 2018, my apologies. In 2018, the purging of over 125,000 folks from the voting docket right away. You got to see how our policies that were there to protect voters, to protect folks and protect people to make sure that they had a voice in this process, um, that it was kind of just dwindled away and no protections were there whatsoever. And then two last things. Uh, Washington D.C. statehood. Why does that matter to everyone? Why should that matter to anyone that's not in D.C. and why should it matter to you? Simply, there's a group of folks in our country who don't have adequate representation. Um, if anything, um, if anything, our core values teaches us is that we are supposed to be the mouthpieces for things that we see are wrong. We are supposed to speak up. We are supposed to be those advocates. There is a group of nearly a million folks, primarily Black and brown folks in this country that are paying crap tons in taxes and not receiving equal representation. This should be an issue that everyone's speaking about. We deserve to have a 51st state. Let's remake these flags. And hey, that's a little bit of job creation. And then lastly, something that's been weighing on my heart heavy, is the small dollar donation democracy dollars ideal, meaning like let's take corporate dollars out of local politics and let's actually give folks let's give folks some idea of what it's like to have political power and equity by giving them funds to really support their own candidates. So we'll hop through we'll do a deeper dive in terms of the policy area, like voter registration and like the modernization of it. We have some facts here. Uh, Voter registration disproportionately blocks would be Black and brown voters from exercising their fundamental right to vote. Not only do we have hard facts and data here in terms of, like I said, those 2018 numbers where folks were just simply like, you don't do what you don't know to be. If you are in a situation where you are working or you're constantly on the go, and let's say politics isn't your day to day, we are all impacted by policy, but we are all impacted mostly by the relative power that we have to really advocate for issues on our own. So if you don't have the relative power to actually take the time and say, you know what, I know we have to vote on this day, this day, this day, because voting is not just a presidential election year thing. It's also when we have ballot initiatives, when we have city council races and school board races and things of that nature. But if you're not aware of the amount of voting that actually happens and takes place, um, you won't have the need to go register yourself to vote whatsoever. So by eliminating these barriers and creating spaces like online registration, which would allow not just Black and brown folks, but folks from across the spectrum to start voting and become more involved in this democratic process. Um, one of the goals of, I believe, all social workers who work in this political space should have is, yes, our job is to be the advocates for the unseen, unheard, underrepresented, but also the overrepresented, and the folks who just don't have the space to break things down or disseminate this information, and making sure that folks are there from the beginning to the end of the political process, especially around these policies that impact them the most. So we have some hard facts here. 1.9 million Asian Americans and Latinx voters registered online in 2018, which is a significant amount. If we can find ways to take these tasks that seem daunting and scary, and it's always some taboo built around it, um, and make them more palatable and make it accessible to where we're meeting folks where they are. Why not? Why not make folks it more easy? It's easier for folks to participate in this process. Um, and as we see here, which, who would have thought that Oregon would be the model for like the best way to like include folks to vote and include folks in democracy? But they're doing some great work out there in terms of making sure folks are registered, and it all starts with like, hey, we know that the best way to get folks registered is to get them right when they come in. So when you have to get your license changed over, you become an eligible voter. Why not? Why give you the daunting task? It's kind of like when Comcast or Verizon, they get you to switch over and they say you have all these rebates for you, but you have to go and claim them. And if you don't claim them in a certain amount of days, then they don't work anymore. Although it's a crap ton of money that we already promised you. It's kind of like that. Like if you're giving me a rebate or promising a rebate, why don't you just apply it for me? And like, why do I have to go through all these hoops? although voting is not a rebate, it's something that we all should be doing. And it's if you provide the space and already the process is like super tangible. Why would folks not do it? Like, why would folks opt out of it? Like, I think here in Michigan, it's harder for you to opt out of being automatically registered to vote, because you have to go the extra effort to tell them I don't want to be registered. And most folks won't do that. Most folks are like, if you're getting your license for the first time, I highly doubt most most 18-year-olds gonna be like, oh, don't register me to vote. They're going to be very excited to get their license and get out of the house probably. And then the other one that these are just some more facts about automatic voter registration. Like the glaring point I pointed out here, comparison to the 2018 election in Georgia, to the 2020 election here, reported 7.6 million people registered to vote in the state, which 5 million came through the automatic voting registration, which those dockets are always liable to the state department to start purging folks off the voting roll, which you have to have the warriors in that space to really be ready to advocate and stand up for the folks and make sure their voices are heard in democracy. And then moving on to a deeper understanding of the same day registration. I've always thought like registration deadlines were just so idiotic when it comes to like voting and things of that nature. I understand is like it helps for GOTV and it helps for the State Department to like kind of like gather like the amount of folks that we may have coming out on a voting day or whatever. But our our job is just simply to be the caveat for people. Voting is the avenue of make or where folks get to have their voices heard unadulterately. So I always thought registration deadlines in general were just idiotic, and what we're starting to see with through this data is they are. Why cut folks off? Why not want to have the most amount of folks included in this process? Um, and as we see here, a few more facts around like just increasing the percentage points of folks actually turning out to vote because they won't be turned away when they go and register. Here at Detroit Action, we did a project that probably most political spaces don't do. During the Biden election, we called Black and Brown folks in the city of Detroit who hasn't voted before, or in this world, I'm talking to some policy wonks or some folks who understand it. It's called the propensity score. Your likelihood to actually vote and get out and vote. We all have a propensity score. It's all being tracked based off the amount of times that you voted, how many times you voted, your likelihood of voting, the amount, the actual how many elections you vote in, and if you have a score of under 50, it's usually a waste of time to call you for in most demographics for on the political side of things. But we took it upon ourselves to call those folks and make sure that they knew that, hey, you can register same day. It's important that your voice is heard because there's a lot of things on this ballot that's going to be um, pertaining to you. It's a lot of things that is going to impact the outcome of your life, but not just your life, but the people around you, the people that depend on you on a day-to-day basis. And we saw a giant increase in same day registration here in the city of Detroit. But not only that, but we saw a vast number of first time voters. We saw an entry of nearly 70,000 new voters into our system here in the city of Detroit, and primarily between the ages of 18 and 25, young black and brown voters. And policies like this promote folks being included in this process. This is a process that is very tumultuous and daunting, and kind of is like it's like the starship. Like most folks just don't know like what are all the pieces about it. Like I think this year was the year of the election because a lot of people probably figured out like, hey, we have a elections canvasser board, and what is that and what do they do? It and then like also like I didn't like do a deeper dive on like some of these things. I'm gonna like glance right through them, but limit like this is just common sense. I feel if I'm in a room, I have to explain why this is a good thing. Some of those people just shouldn't be in the room. Eliminating our discriminatory like voter ID laws. We're eliminating things where folks who are unhoused aren't able to voice their opinion, or folks. It's generally folks uh, who are on their last leg, who actually need to be participating in democracy a little bit more because these outcomes mean a little bit more than some folks. because wherever life situation or wherever life got them. It's just crazy that we always try to take those folks and marginalize them and kick them out when they have the most to lose through these processes, because the men and women who decide policy, and we all know on this call that policy is all by design. None of the outcomes are like by chance. Um, the folks who need to be a part of these conversations from beginning to end are commonly being left out. As we see here, like the voting rights restoration, and we start restoring voting rights, we can see who, if we center the work in the most impacted, we can see who is being most impacted by the reintroduction of these policies and bringing folks in. When we say we have an intent, we're going to be intentional about bringing folks into democracy and making sure that everyone has a representative voice in democracy. We can see once we center it into the theory of who's the most impacted is Black and brown folks. In Florida, they had their version of the Voting Restoration Act, they brought 372 thousand new Black and brown Floridians into their process, 120,000 Black and brown Georgians into their process, 15,000 Black and brown voters in Wisconsin, 205,000 Black and brown voters in Texas. Those may sound like just small numbers, but those are enough. Those numbers can change the outcomes and the trajectory of states, whether it's federal, statewide. And then when we start seeing like policies like this, or just conversations around policy like this, um, things that have been stacked up for years and years and years, started to come to fruition when more folks are at the table and we really center it in who is going to be most impacted. Um, and then I want to bring up DC statehood because it's important that we all rock with DC. 63% of the residents of DC are residents of color, and we have an ungodly amount of people in our country to simply, we can have that conversation about Puerto Rico next, but we also have to center it in what does Puerto Rico want? Do they want statehood, or do they want to be their own country? Um, but we have in our country, in our nation's capital. I went to Howard University, so DC does have a sweet spot in my heart. It raised me a little bit, so I think it's important for wards 1 through 8 to have some equitable representation and actually have a vote in this union for the first time and ever. Eleanor's Holmes Norton has championed so many things for Black and brown folks across the country, and then for her to have a symbolic vote or just a symbolic voice in that hallowed body is asinine. Her voice deserves to be heard just like everyone else's, because she speaks on behalf of a large chunk of folks, primarily Black and brown folks in this country. And taxation without representation, it just ain't it in the 21st century. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing for a hot second and open it up for some questions, and to see what we can do in terms of conversation. Yeah, the thing is, like, how do you take the stories or the pathic nature of these stories that we're going to be collecting, or the clients that we work with? How do you take their stories and really package it into a space where we can talk both policy and the most like astringent terms, and then talk policy and like in a pathic way, like how this policy actually we get to see firsthand this policy is centered in who is impacted most. So that's one of the things I'll pull away from this, is seeing like the sheer numbers of the introduction of folks into democracy, how important it is for folks to how important it is for folks to actually be a part of this process. That's what I would bring up. It includes a whole new voting wing, which may scare some folks. If you're in a Republican office, I probably would not bring up the fact that it's going to bring in more folks into this union or in this space. But I would bring up the fact that you're really including folks into democracy, and like, why not have the voices of this country truly represented? Yeah, so that's some of the things. That's one of the main things I would bring up. Just really pulling to that pathic piece because our job is to share the stories of the clients that we work with, whether it's a nonprofit or a group of folks that are coming into, or you were out knocking doors for a campaign this year yourself. It's really to channel those stories and really think, if I was that parent, how would I want this orated on my behalf, or if I was that person who being denied, or this bill is drawn to make sure that I'm included into this space. Like, what is that story? What is that piece? What do you need to pull from them to get them to understand that how important this is? I see Natalia has asked, how do we break down the legislation and identify key points, which is a great point. I'll transition to that. Just to break down the legislation, it's because it's so daunting. There's a lot of things in there. I'm going to share over with Notion that PowerPoint, and hopefully get it out to you folks as well. And then you literally can just go in all those subcategories, go in there and immerse yourself in that, and find and become your own expert. I believe in the 21st century, all ignorance is bliss, yes, but all ignorance is chosen simply because you can hop on Google and find anything. Rather you have a hang up a racial question that you want to ask someone, whether you have want to know more about HR1 or just about anything. If I want to learn how to make sourdough bread tonight, I will find it on Google. You can like find anything on there at all. Like it's just not it's about monitoring the way that you do your searches and things of that nature. But all information's at your fingertips. So when I identify key points from this, it's like what make like the key point for me is that it's centered, it's people centered, it's centered in community. This is a policy that the community has come together and agreed upon. They already have the most important thing in policy is that built-in permission structure. That's the folks that the policy is going to be monitoring or policing. Now these folks are saying, "Hey, I'm agreeing to this policing. This is a social contract I'm willing to sign." Um, so that would be the key point. This is something. It's the reason it's called For the People, the For the People Act, because it's made for the people, by the people, with the people in mind. And it's centering it in the folks who's going to be most impacted. And so those are the key points. Is we're in a space in time in our country. If you're not going to do things with intentionality, or call things out to truth, we just don't need it. We spent the last 4 years smiling and like and holding it together. But now we're in a space and time to be bold, to do things with intention, to call truth to power. And this is simply what this does. It's an intentional policy. The policies that we need to start seeing to not if we really want to truly heal the country or restore the soul of a nation. I'm from Detroit, and every time I hear the soul of a nation, I instantly think of the Queen of Soul. And one of my favorite songs, when I was growing up as a kid, my mom always played it while we were cleaning, unfortunately. But now it's a favorite song of mine. It's "Look Into Your Heart" by Aretha Franklin, and she says this line: "When you look into your heart and take some inventory," she says, "of your woman and your glory." But I say of your person, of your character in general, is you have to really look into yourself and take some inventory of who I really am as a person. Do I really want to center this work? Because it's so easy when you get into policy to bow down to the folks who are in power, to labor unions and folks who just don't have the best interests of people always in mind. Um, so you really have to, when you look at policies like this and you're starting to push policy with the most pathic responses, it's all about the character and inventory that you have in your morals and what values are you going to stand on. Because this work isn't always easy, and it doesn't. You don't always see the outcomes you want to see, unfortunately. But someone has to do it, and someone has to speak up on behalf of our clients or on behalf of the folks that look to you and look in your eye for you to be their champion. I commonly say all the time, I didn't sign up to be anyone's role model or hero, but unfortunately, by default, that just happens.
Thank you for sharing that, Jibri. I had a question.
Mhm.
What are some tips that you would give in general to anyone who would be entering into their lobbying session? Like how to prepare, like what to do if if a congressperson or elected official doesn't agree with you, how do you handle that?
You know, you won't. Is, you're, never, if you're in a space where everyone agrees with you, you probably should leave it. Um, but it, it's someone has to do it, and someone has to speak up on behalf of our clients or on behalf of the folks that look The best way to prepare for this is really be yourself. Go in there as your full self. And I'm just transitioning into the space of like, authenticity, all that jazz. So I've always been in a space like, you only share yourself with the people that's close to you. But it's important that you take your own personal story and take these personal experiences that you have, because we are. Of course, we have our degrees and our cool like letters behind our names or whatever. We are fortunate enough to have the perseverance to get through school. It doesn't make us the smartest people. Just make us like we had the ability to get over adversity. So like let's knock that off for the first in the first place. It's really the best thing is go in there and be yourself and speak from your heart and speak through your values and in your morals, because you may not move someone based on like money, things of that nature, because it's going to come down to some finite things. But most people won't remember your name. Like most people in this phone call won't remember my name in 10 years. But if I do something to make you feel, you will always remember me. Folks don't remember interactions per se, but they do remember how you made them feel. So if you leave that lasting impact of really pulling at the strings in terms of this policy is going to impact folks in your district, and this is why, and this is how. So I used to work in a live music bar in DC through grad school called Madam's Organ, and one of the our house band folks, his name's Rico. I love him to death. He's like a second father. He always would tell me, when I'm singing, I have one or two jobs. If I'm not moving butts, I'm moving hearts. And that's the same way I think about when I'm presenting policy or other folks' story. If people trust me enough to let me present their stories to politicians or to folks in power to promote policy and things of that nature, it's that same mentality. I'm either going to move your butts to the pole, or I'm going to move your heart to you where you ain't sleeping tonight because you made a horrible vote that's going to impact someone's life. So I would say body that and embody that. We are as social workers, we are innately we're innate to listening, we're innate to storytelling, we're innate to pulling out the best and really finding those gaps. So use those skills. You paid a lot of money for them. Why not use them, right?
Thank you for that, Jibri, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. And thank you, everyone, for your amazing questions. Just some reminders, obviously, Student Advocacy Day is on March 11th, 6 p.m. Watch out for your emails for a lot of follow-ups. I know some of our crisp emails do end up in people's spam, so just regularly check your spam folder to make sure that you're not forgetting anything. And this video will be uploaded onto our website. We will be forwarding it to everyone who is registered along with the PowerPoint. 11, I said PM, I meant AM. 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. PST, depending on which side of the country you're on.
Real quick before we do close everything, I think it's important that we all like kind of root ourselves in action. So I did share my Twitter, but I'm going to ask everyone to head to their space in their community, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, however you organize your digital community. But throw that question out tonight and ask, what do you know about HR1? Or post something from this that you learned from today, or you took away from today, and post it up, throw it out there, and organize your community around it, and then get some commitments to folks to come on March 11th to make sure that they continue this conversation. So if I hate giving out homework, but I do know one day I may be a professor, so I should get used to it. So yeah, that's the homework I'm giving to everyone on this call. The call to action is to make sure that folks know that these conversations are happening. The only way policy moves is these conversations don't happen in silos. So.
Thank you so much for that, Jibri. And with that, I would like to conclude our session. As before, watch out for emails. This will all be posted. And I did post a link to our website where the program and our speaker and more information can be found there. It will be updated regularly as we get more details. So please do look out for that as well. And I cannot wait to see everyone on March 11th. Thank you so much for attending. Have a good night, everyone. And thank you, Jibri.
See you, folks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.